There's a place I have found in the shade on the ground, far from all worries and troubling sound. When I go there to be by myself, only me, no one can guess what I came there to see. There's a sun in the sky, there's a cloud drifting by, all kinds of birds make you wish you could fly. And in the distance I see someone waving at me. I hope that it's you, but who else could it be?
Hey, here we are. It's Monday morning in the Untold radio studios here for coffee time. Little bit different format today. Normally we are live on YouTube, live on Facebook, live on Twitter, and then we are uploading the show to all the podcast platforms. However, we are not live on YouTube today. So we are, if anybody's watching the show live, it's probably through our Facebook platform. We kind of put a heads up out there that would be the case today. So we welcome everybody who's joining us that way. And we appreciate your guys' support. I'm going to bring my guest in today. We're being joined by Dr. Dean Bertram, one of my fellow hosts here at Untold Radio. How are you today, Dean?
I'm good. It's a beautiful spring morning in the Northwoods. If we get much more weather like this, there won't be a single skerrick of snow left on the ground. So that's nice.
I would like to fast forward to that point after the winter we have had.
Yes, it was another rough one.
This last storm that came through was pretty interesting as far as the band and how from a latitude type point east to west, it really stayed narrowly tracked, because down here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we only got about an inch of snow Friday night. But just go a couple hours north of us in line with Fargo all the way over to Minneapolis, they got about 12 inches of snow.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's a lot. So, we didn't get quite that much, but we got a few inches here. It looked like it was the middle of winter again. I got excited because I've been shooting this documentary and I needed another couple winter shots, and I was like, I can take advantage of it. It looks like it's December and January again. Yep. So that was good. It's all gone now though. All that snow, it looks like it's properly spring, except for a few patches. But if the weather stays like this, it'll all be gone in a week.
Yeah, that's what I really found unique about this winter is we had snow show up in the middle of November, which is normal to get some decent snow before Thanksgiving. But normally in whether it's December, January, February, you'll hit a inconsistently warm week or 3 or 4 days where it'll hit 45 degrees and melt off the snow that you got and kind of hit that reset button. And we just didn't have that this winter. I mean, we've had snow cover from mid-November until about last week here. We finally started seeing the grass emerge a little bit here and there, and with some warmer temps. So it's nice. And it's funny because after a hard cold winter, doesn't take much to make it feel a little tropical around here.
That's true. It's funny. I'm from Sydney, Australia, so it's t-shirt weather here when in Sydney you'd be wearing heavy jackets still. It's like, oh, okay, it's 50 degrees. This is beautiful. In Sydney you would have been like, this is freezing. So it's quite different.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things I wanted to touch on today. Well, first of all, it was an interesting weekend, not only weather-wise with, all the tornadoes that we've been seeing across the country. It seems to be an unusually high amount of activity for this early in the spring. Makes you kind of curious about the pace that it's setting as far as you hear that a lot of talk amongst the climatologists, the meteorologists talking about how this is a devastatingly quick start to tornado season, and they're a little concerned as to how severe it may get throughout the spring. So might be interesting to follow that. But on a lighter note, today is we're celebrating Jane Goodall's birthday today. So Jane is, I believe, 89 today. She was born in 1934. So that would put her at 89, I believe.
Wow,
But
it's a fair innings.
wow. Yeah, is right. I mean, when you look at how much she accomplished in this life and how respected she is amongst her peers, it is just incredible that she can live this long and really enjoy that. And from those that I've heard that have conversations with her, she's as sharp as she ever was. So that's pretty awesome. But that's good to hear that she's doing well.
And she became sympathetic to Sasquatch research, right? You probably know much more about that than I do, but I'm conscious that she said some favorable things.
She certainly hasn't taken the route of discounting the possibility of anything, when it comes to Sasquatch. I think she's reluctant to probably put specifics as to what those parameters could be. You hear different conversations about the population it would take to sustain something, like, things like that. What they could endure, what they can't endure. She hasn't ever really gone out and made comments like that, but certainly has acknowledged, I think, the possibility that this could easily be existing. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Another thing I saw this weekend was something I was completely unaware of. I didn't realize that Grover Krantz had dedicated his body to the Smithsonian. I'd never heard that before, and I found this where his best friend, his dog, anthropologist Grover Krantz, gave his body to the Smithsonian Museum as a demonstration of the value of skeletons as teaching aids. His one and only request was to have his devoted dog at his side till the very end, and his request was granted by the museum. And you can see the display on the right that the museum had. But from what I understand, this was only in the public section of the Smithsonian for a short time, and it was then put into storage. And
Wow.
I'd never heard this before. I didn't realize that.
They should have done a replica Sasquatch bone skeleton thing and put it next
They
to
should
him
have
as
done
well.
something to kind of honor what his life's passion and work was dedicated to, but
Yeah,
that would have
fascinating.
been neat. But yeah, so just some little things that I was running across this weekend while researching some things. I do believe yesterday, I think I saw Michael Freeman post on Facebook that yesterday was his dad, Paul Freeman's 20th anniversary since the day he passed away. And it was touching. Michael had put in the post that he hopes that he's made his dad proud with what he's trying to accomplish and bringing awareness to what he had done. And I thought it was a great post. I thought it was worth mentioning too. 20 years ago today, Paul Freeman passed away. But what I was talking to you a little bit before we went live here, and there is let me pull this up here. There's a video that I ran across that just blew me away. It really did. When you think about all the different stories that are out there in the media, how many real good feel-good stories do we run across, right? It just seems like sometimes they become fewer and far between.
Indeed.
But this is a story about A guy up in Northern California was skiing, and this just happened last week. He was skiing in a very remote area. I don't know if and I'm not sure if he helicoptered in or if this is just the backside of one of the service resorts. And to be honest with you, it looks like it's closed. So maybe they had closed this area for avalanche danger or something and just recently had reopened it up again. But tremendous depth of snow in this video. Let me pull it up here. But let's see here. There we go. But the most interesting part of this is not the terrain or the remoteness of this. It's what this guy finds while he's skiing. And the video is a couple minutes long, but I think it is really something, and I think we'll watch it here. Can you hear audio there?
I can hear it.
So he's going to look over to the left and see the bottom of a snowboard.
Whoa. Oh, you all right?
Real hard just to navigate through this snow. I mean, it's chest deep, you know.
Hold on, I'm coming.
You know how many bottom slopes are just black? How much of a difference it made that he had such a colorful snowboard he could see.
Yeah, good point.
He's upside down.
Hear me? Oh, come on. Come on, help me out. Help me out here. Okay, you're good. You're good. I got you. You can breathe. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Catch your breath for a sec. I'm gonna help. Okay. Yeah, no problem, man. You're good. Oh. All right. Get a little more snow with me around. All right. Okay. Okay, all right?
I'm good.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna back up first. I show that, okay?
Thank you.
You're good, man. You're good. Holy
Look at how remote that is. There's nobody out there. It's just crazy that he came across this guy in time.
It's unbelievable.
Okay. All right. Oh my God. All right, how you doing? You good?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. Okay.
Take your time, man.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you're good, man.
That is just incredible. So in an interview afterwards, this guy had told him he thought he was going to die. Thought he was going to die alone.
Gosh. God put that other
That
skier in
is
the
just
right
one of the
place
most
at the
right. It's just one of the most incredible videos I've seen in a long time. I just could not believe it when I watched it. But how
It's
grateful
sure
he
nice
must
to
have been to be found.
Can you imagine? And it's so nice to see something with such a positive ending to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this when you like I say, when you factor in the remoteness of where they're at, I mean, the whole 4-minute video, nobody else skis past. I mean, and when he pans that shot down the mountain, I mean, you don't see anybody there. It kind of looked like where he was skiing, there was a trail, and you could tell somebody had gone in front of him, but this snowboarder just planted it head first and just went 4 or 5 foot down into the snow and couldn't get out. But yeah, he was
As Joe
and
Fox said, it's unreal.
also I was really impressed with, when you operate under duress like that, the ability to keep your demeanor and your attitude just calm so you can be effective at helping someone. This guy was really good at that. I mean, but no, that was incredible. Got a few other things that we were going to talk about. One of them is, let me pull this up. We have all these tornadoes that keep going on, like we had mentioned earlier. This one was in Arkansas, some pictures of the damage that they've had down there. But I mean, these tornadoes have been stretching from Mississippi, Arkansas, all Tennessee. I mean, it's just crazy how widespread they have been. I even seen up in the extreme northeast, they had a couple of them up there. But just devastating. I mean, a lot of times you see a tornado will hit a town and clip a couple buildings or whatever, but then some of them are just so large. When you start dealing with F4 and F5 tornadoes, they can just take out blocks wide of area. And there's no doubt there is some pretty severe devastation that's happening from these. So we just want everybody to know our hearts go out to those who are dealing with these bad weather patterns. Some of us are experiencing some great weather, but there are some folks out there that are dealing with the worst. So it's just crazy.
You'd really want to have you'd really want a basement to go into when that thing ripped through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of these, a lot of these apartments and whatnot. They don't have that type of protection available. But Yeah, that was all down. These pictures here are from Arkansas, but yeah, there's been storms just all across the Midwest over to the East Coast and up into the Northeast. But pretty devastating. See what else I got here. Oh, this is an interesting story. Well, this one here, we won't go into the whole thing, but it is scientists off the coast of Japan went down to 27,400 feet deep and found this fish swimming. It is a snail fish, but they say it's the deepest they've ever recorded a fish swimming at. And the second deepest record that they had was the same type of fish, a snail fish. But made me start thinking, Dean, about, you know, how much pressure there has to be at 27,400 feet deep. It's amazing. It's amazing that this fish just doesn't collapse, on itself at that depth. But yeah, that was one of the things that they were talking about in science lately, is this fish at that depth was evidently a pretty big anomaly. This was something here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, imagine having that served up for you when you went to sushi. Not a real pretty fish, that thing.
It's got to be pretty tough in order to resist 27,400 feet deep.
Right.
So this this is an article about, it's a science article on squids. Now, you know how a squid can go transparent and kind of almost become invisible. They talk a little bit about how they do that, okay? And it gets really into it with the scientific terms, the cell shading that happens. And what happened was the scientists weren't able to mimic this. They were in a lab trying to understand how this squid does that. And so they had these squid cells that they were working with, trying to watch and understand. They couldn't recreate it, but they took some human cells in the lab, and they were able to recreate how it does this with human cells. And it's their research focused on lucifores, skin cells that facilitate structural coloration through proteins called reflectins. And these reflectins typically clump together, forming nanoparticles that can bounce back light that appears white. By letting light through with little scattering, the surface can appear transparent. With more scattering, the skin becomes opaque. The researcher's goal was to control the reflectant in these cells in order to control the transparency. We wanted to engineer mammalian cells to stably, instead of temporarily, form reflectant nanostructures for which we could better control the scattering of light. Now, they were having an issue with getting it to do this. They were trying to figure out what do they need to do to these cells to get them to do that. And they started realizing if they added just a little bit of salt to them, that they would, in fact, go transparent and do that. What's interesting to me is the ending of the article. It says, the point of this discovery isn't to help create invisible humans. Instead, he hopes that his team's findings will allow scientists to better image squid skin cells, which will in turn hopefully lead to more squid-inspired innovations like liquid windows. But I got to ask you, Dean, once you realize how to do something, do you really believe science is going to say, well, we aren't going to do that. Let's just forget that we can get it to do that?
I think there's a line in one of the Jurassic Park movies, maybe the first one, from the Jeff Goldblum character, and he says science was so busy trying to see if they could do something, they didn't stop to think whether they should do something. And I think that's often the case with science.
I think that is right on. Just because we figure out a way to do it, and sometimes maybe that becomes so, breakthrough type wow, that we forget to ask, is this something we really want to do or should do? And I certainly they haven't come up with a way to make humans transparent or invisible, but this is the start. When they start figuring out how to make how does a squid do it, they take human cells, they realize how to do it with human cells, and then they say, well, we're just going to forget that we were able to do that, and we're just going to use this to move technology to create different types of liquid windows and things like that. I think it's a little bit concerning as to once you realize you're capable of something, just ignoring that. So,
I think
but it's interesting how much this finds its way into conversations, whether it's Bigfoot or aliens or anything else. The cloaking part of the conversation.
That's very true. There's often reports of things which almost seem like the creature out of the Predator movie when it puts on its cloak. I mean, people will literally say it was like something out of the Predator. So people do seem to have encounters with these things which shimmer in the woods and seem to have some type of, whether it's technology or whether it's paranormal, I'm not entirely sure, or whether it's natural or whatever it is. But there's certainly people who have these experiences with these things.
Yes. And like you said, I mean, the when you hear encounters, I mean, it's not every encounter that you hear that, but there are more than a few that has described things like that. That it picked up a texture or a pattern to it that made it not appear alive. It didn't look flesh and blood anymore. It looked more like a liquid state or something that people would probably describe as extraterrestrial, or what they're going to use for the reference when they're trying to figure out what descriptors to put towards it. You do hear the movie references oftentimes, really. But
yeah, there's
what do you got for? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's what I was just going to say. There's a famous case which David Paulides talks about in the film Missing 411, The Hunted, which is when Bruce Maccabee's wife, and Bruce Maccabee is a relatively well-known scientist with an interest in UFOs, when his wife was out bow hunting in a deer stand, and she saw in front of her something moving through the trees, which for all intents and purposes looked like the Predator when it had its cloaking shield on. And she even took a weird photo. And I think Maccabee's specialty is he looks at optics, and he was like, there's very strange things about this photograph. And supposedly at the same time, in the nearby school where the band were practicing, there was a UFO seen in the sky at almost the identical period. So often these weird anomalies seem to be connected to other things. So who knows? It's a fascinating account. That movie's great too, Missing 411, The Hunted.
Yeah, it was really cool to see the migration throughout the movie, starting out with just the nuts and bolts of this guy, the opening story of it, the elderly gentleman who's with 3 other elderly gentlemen, and they're all blocking on a deer drive while the younger nephews and sons are up driving deer down the hill, and he just disappears. Nobody ever hears from him again. And this guy's 80 some years old. I mean, it's like, where did he go? Right. But then as the movie or the documentary progresses, you start introducing the idea that there is a Sasquatch type option to consider in some of these disappearances. But it evolved even further when you started bringing forward this whole extraterrestrial connection, or at least a Sasquatch with some type of supernatural capability beyond just the flesh and blood understanding a lot of people would have, when it came down to that lady talking about her experience in that stand, bow hunting. And like you said, this was literally, they showed where she was hunting, and where she was like a mile from the edge of town where the high school is, and over the field of the high school there was a UFO, I guess, that was seen by more than a few people. Fascinating, interesting things to consider. I just
And that documentary, of course, has Ron Moorhead in it as well. And there's all kinds of weird things when we look at what was going on in the Sierra camp and when we listen to the Sierra sounds.
mhm.
Moorhead's interpretation, of course, is that Bigfoot is more complicated than just a standard flesh and blood
Yeah.
creature. And his book, Quantum Bigfoot, which is excellent, he talks about that at some length. But I think that the fascinating thing with Paulides' research for so long was he was so reluctant to say what it was. But it seems like now his most recent documentary, which is a UFO-orientated one, I forget the title of it. It's the one that came after Missing 411, The Hunted.
Yep.
I think it might be Missing 411, The UFO Connection or something. But he seems to be now more comfortable to publicly go on the record and say there seem to be a lot of these disappearances have something to do with what we think of as UFO phenomenon, including a hunter who went missing in the most recent one. And the last time he was in the area, he told his girlfriend that he was being stalked essentially by a UFO, this black object in the sky. And the next time he went there, boom, gone, never found. So it seems like Paulides is moved closer towards perhaps a UFO interpretation. Mind you, my position, as anybody who watches Talking Weird or Mysterious Library on this network knows, I think a lot of these, what people think of as a different phenomenon, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs or ghosts or religious apparitions, whatever, I think a lot of this is actually interconnected.
Yeah, one of the interesting, I had Ron Moorhead on my show a few weeks ago, and when a lot of people prior to the Missing 411 documentary from Paulides, prior to that, the Sierra sounds kind of stood on their own as these captured sounds that seem to represent what these gentlemen had been experiencing out there over quite a period of time in that hunting camp. And the Missing 411 starts introducing, well, I shouldn't say introducing, because I think it was talked about quite a bit before that, but started putting a visual on that beam of light that was described as traveling horizontally through that area. And when I had Ron on, I asked him, when you watched the 411 when it was done, did you feel comfortable with how Paulides had represented what you had experienced and the people that were with you had experienced? And he said, absolutely. He hit it spot on. There was no Hollywoodization to what was depicted with that beam, like in reference to or in contrast to what Ron says he saw and experienced. It represented that very well. And so I found that really interesting because, Dean, sometimes you see these documentaries and you got to ask yourself, is there a little bit of amplification going on here above and beyond maybe what was originally occurring? But according to Ron, it wasn't.
No, I like a lot of Ron's stuff. I had him on Talking Weird very shortly after we moved to Untold as well. And I was fascinated that some of the phenomenon would travel home with him. Like he would have weird experiences when he was away from the camp, which people don't often talk about in the Bigfoot community. Like he would hear strange noises and things when he wasn't even there. So again, it seemed to tie in for me to this broader idea that some of these what we think of as various phenomena are interrelated. I think what happens in all of the research communities in the broader Fortean space, so the UFO community, the Bigfoot community, the ghost hunting community, is they don't ask questions which are outside of that little realm that they operate in. So your average Bigfoot researcher isn't going to ask the question, Have you had any other paranormal experiences? Have you ever seen a
Yeah.
UFO?
Yeah.
When you start asking people those questions, and this isn't something I invented, this is something John Keel, one of my favorite researchers, worked out back in, I think, the late 60s or the 70s. When you ask somebody who's had one anomalous experience, not always, but often they would have had other equally strange experiences, which we think of as not being related to, say, the Bigfoot experience, or sometimes they'll have the same experiences will be directly related. Like they also saw a strange light the night they saw Bigfoot, or after they saw a UFO, they also had poltergeist activity in their home later that day or something. So often these things seem to be interconnected. And obviously there's no way I can say how they're interconnected, but I
Yeah.
think it's interesting when we see those parallels in experiences, cases. I think it's definitely worth noting that maybe some of this stuff is stranger than it appears on the surface. And believe me, it appears strange enough on the surface anyway, but maybe it's even stranger than it appears at first.
Yeah, I've often said when it comes to research for me, I start with a flesh and blood approach, and just because I have to start somewhere, But when I'm looking at data and I'm trying to come up with what's the most plausible explanation out of sometimes several different options that you're looking at that explains what's going on, a lot of times I can find a natural explanation as to what may have and be interpreted here. But I've got to remain open-minded enough to follow where the data leads me. And there's a lot of people who are just close to that, unfortunately, because I think that, I'm not saying that it is all connected like you are, but I certainly can't rule out that it isn't. And there's enough encounters out there that when you look at the descriptors of what they experienced and what they've seen, I don't know if it all fits in a flesh and blood box, so to speak. The missing 411 actually was probably the most exploitive example of that when we start looking at some of those cases in particular. But one of the interesting things that Ron was talking about that was pretty revealing, I had often wondered, out of the released Sierra sounds that he had put out, was that all of them that he had, right? I mean, he put out 2 CDs that focus on this. Scott Nelson developed a study of the Sierra sounds and broke them down into just over 600 different phonetics that are displayed in that. In hopes that if we were to capture other audio, that we could find existing phonetics in other examples, But when Ron was on the show, I had him on with Todd Neese, and they're both very good friends, have spent, hundreds of nights together out in the woods doing research. And Todd used to tell me how him and Ron and Peter Byrne would go out in an RV and just spend, 4 or 5 days out there, right? And in the evenings, they'd sit around the fire and have a few drinks. And one night, Ron said, "You want me to blow you away?" And Todd said, "Yeah." And they walked into the RV, and Ron pulled out a shoebox that had over 10 cassettes in it that were, I don't know if they were 60 or 90-minute cassettes, but they were all full of Sierra sounds.
Wow.
Sounds that he had captured, over those 4 years or whatever. And Todd Neese told me, he says, I sat there and listened to 4 cassettes, like over 4 hours. And he said it's just mesmerizing that he has this much recorded. And, you ask Ron, well, why don't you release all of it? He said, I think I released enough of it to give people an idea of what it's like, as far as a good example of what they were hearing out there. But I think he's probably open-minded to releasing all of them, at some point soon here. It'll be interesting to see if he does. But I always wondered, did we get to hear everything that he had captured, right?
Uh-huh.
It was really interesting to find out that he had, it's like 10 to 14 hours of these recordings. So,
wow.
but,
I'd love to hear the other ones which haven't been released yet. Hopefully
Yeah.
we'll put them out.
well, from what I heard from Todd, who sat there and listened to cassette after cassette for at least 4 of them, he said it just melted my mind. He said it's just crazy how much was recorded there. And I can't believe that there wouldn't be people that would just, I mean, I guess you got to ask yourself, how much of it are you going to hear before you just say, okay, you keep going and going and going, like, right? But there's some of us who are I can nerd out on that sort of thing. I could binge listen every cassette he has, to be honest with you.
Oh, I know the paranormal nerd binging. Did you ever see the X-Files episode? It was so funny. Jose Chung's from Outer Space in season 3. Greatest X-Files episode ever made. At the end of that, when the narrator, Jose Chung, who's writing this story, and goes, as for Agent Mulder, what he does in his spare time or something, and you cut to Agent Mulder and he's watching the Patterson Gimlin film just again and again. He's just rewinding it and watching it over and over again.
Yeah. That I remember that. I remember when I first saw that episode, I found it intriguing, but it was interesting to find out, at the end, when after the series is out, that people still refer back to. I've heard a lot of people claim, "Oh, that's the best episode of it."
Yeah, it's genius, because why I love it so much is it touches on all these questions of what the phenomenon really is. Do you know what I mean? And there's that wonderful scene, which I think is maybe the greatest scene in perhaps the history of UFO film, is when I think it's Mulder's talking to the alien who's smoking a cigarette in the diner, who's really an Air Force pilot dressed as an alien. And the alien says, I can't tell you what's real or what's not real anymore. I can't even promise you're talking to me right now. How do you know what's really going on? And that's how weird some of this stuff gets. Speaking of that, actually, we are not this week's Mysterious Library, because we already had something. Oh, no, it is this week's Mysterious. I'm sorry. This week's Mysterious Library, Jason and I, on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Central, are actually looking at an article called How to Hack the Simulation. It's a journal piece from somebody from the University of Louisville called Roman Yampolsky. I'm probably mispronouncing Yampolsky, but that might be right. And it's essentially, it posits the theory, which lots of people have been talking about. I guess the simplest way of explaining it is like the Matrix, which is what the kind of, the default shorthand is. But the idea that maybe we don't live in a base reality. And this article says, if we don't live in a base reality, if we live somehow inside a simulation, how do you actually crack that simulation and get out? And it might be a lot harder than just taking the red pill, like in the Matrix. So when I hear about very strange anomalous phenomena, like we've been talking about, things which extend just beyond perhaps something which is flesh and blood or something which is just nuts and bolts, I often wonder if the way these things come and go from our reality, if like that alien, actually Air Force agent dressed as an alien, explained to Agent Mulder, I can't tell you what's real or not. Maybe we're experiencing something which isn't the reality that we think it is. Maybe there's a reality outside of ours, which has fascinated me for a long time, because this is something Gnostic Christians used to talk about way back in the day. It's also something which is part of Buddhism, the idea that this mightn't be the most important reality. There might be something above and beyond it. It's also something the Neoplatonists talked about. So there was a long religious and esoteric tradition that our reality isn't the real one, but it obviously became part of science fiction tropes through people like Philip K. Dick, who also had experiences which made him think this wasn't the real reality, up through the Matrix films, up through episodes like that X-Files. So this idea that things might be weirder than what we think they are has become a popular science fiction trope. But there's a long-standing esoteric tradition that reality mightn't be what we think it is. And perhaps if that's the case, that might explain some of these things that we can never nail down. That might be why we never seem to be able to get a Bigfoot body, or we never seem to be able to get, an ashtray from a crashed flying saucer, or we never seem to be able to get that irrefutable proof of the existence of ghosts. Maybe it's because the very reality we're in isn't what we think it is, and these things come and go in some capacity. So I'm looking forward to breaking down that article with Jason this Tuesday night.
That'll be interesting. I remember when you guys first started doing the show here on the network, that I tuned into the first broadcast, and I thought, I don't know if this is really in my wheelhouse or not, but I want to check it out. And I was just super intrigued. I mean, I haven't missed an episode since. Just
Thank you, Jeff.
It's one of those things that I don't. First of all, I certainly don't have to look at something and say I subscribe to that theory to be able to learn something from it, or at least learn about it, to have it for reference when somebody else is talking about something. I'm familiar with what they're talking about. But man, I'll tell you what, a lot of it is intriguing. From your show that the first one you talked about, I believe, was on the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, I think we did Von Daniken first, Ancient Astronaut Theory, but I think the Loch Ness might have been the second one. It was very early. You're right, very early.
But I just remember watching it, just saying, I don't know what I'm going to get from this, and then I'm just intrigued by all the different historical references, and all of that comes along with these discussions. So that's why I truly say, I don't know what your corner of the room is when it comes to people who have an interest in the paranormal, whether you're strictly Bigfoot, whether you're a flesh and blood, just Bigfoot person, or whether you're here for the ufology, but Bigfoot's kind of, I don't know. There's something for everybody on this network as far as where your interests are. But I also believe that people find themselves intrigued by a lot of the discussions and the shows that happen, even if they aren't here really originally for that show, or that topic. So
I think we have a fantastic audience here as well. For example, on last Saturday that just was, Talking Weird, I had Eli Watson, who's one of the filmmakers from Small Town Monsters, and he does their new YouTube-based series, Mysteries and Monsters. And the episode we primarily talked about was one where he essentially uncovered this UFO cult nobody really even knows about in the historical record. I know I'm somebody whose background, I have a PhD in UFO belief, and I've spent time with UFO cults or UFO new religious organizations, as sociologists would call them. So I think I have a better knowledge than most about UFO cults. I'd never heard of this one. Anyway, it was a great episode, and people might want to check that out when I chatted to Eli. But afterwards, we had an audience member. I don't know his real name, but he goes by the handle of Grasshopper et al.
Oh, yeah,
and I've seen him comment. Yeah. Anyway, he went and did his own research and found more about the cult leader, which even Eli hadn't found out, and contacted me and said, I don't know if Eli knows about this. I put him in contact with Eli, and Eli was like, fantastic. I hadn't found out this stuff. And another regular viewer, Ed Schultz, who's also been a guest on Talking Weird. Ed used to be known as the psychic priest. He was
I believe he's in our chat right now.
Oh, okay. Hey, Ed. Ed Schultz used to be the exorcist, an exorcist, because I think they had a few different ones for Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were probably the most famous, ghost hunters, paranormal investigators ever. He used to be known as the psychic priest. He has all kinds of backgrounds in the silver mind control method, in remote viewing. And he suggested, and I haven't told Eli yet, but I plan to, he suggested, this is Ed, said, why don't you see if there's a remote viewing organization? And he linked me one he knew about, to find out where the mines are that Eli's looking for, because supposedly this UFO cult dug into the ground for whatever reason. There's one theory that they were looking for Noah's Ark. Certainly the leader of the cult had a background in engineering, and another member of the cult also had a background in mining. So these people would have been capable of tunneling into the earth. So, yeah, and that was a great suggestion by Ed Schultz. So, again, our audience here on the Untold Radio Network, they're spectacular. Yeah, they're really switched on. I mean, I'm so happy with the people that I have who listen to my show. And I'm sure that, and I know these people listen to multiple shows across the network. So,
yeah, and, because everybody comes from a different background, probably shows up here with different interests in mind. I've come to accept that we'll have expressions of differing opinions in the chats, in the live chats. That's something that, when I do a live show on Monday night, you know, we're seeing all this occur in the chat as we're doing the show, and it's great because it's interactive. People can put in all cap letters and ask a question to the guest, and the guest can address it, so they can really be a part of the show. But my only rule I ever have is just be respectful to each other. There's no doubt we're not going to agree on everything. But to be able to have a differing opinion and still be respectful is something that I believe everybody's capable of. It's just unfortunately not everybody does all the time. So
That's very true.
uh,
I think that is sad that some people can't accept that people have different opinions to them. I think my opinion in this paranormal space is different to the vast majority of people, but I can have a civilized conversation with anybody. I'm happy to hear a different point of view, but I think because belief gets involved, and as John Keel, one of my favorite authors, period, used to say, belief is the enemy. So I think people get so tied into a belief system, and it's like any belief system. It doesn't have to be one in the paranormal world. It can be a political belief system or a religious belief system or a personal belief system, whatever. People get so entrenched in that belief system. If somebody questions it, instead of going, well, I disagree with what you say, but I agree with your right to say it, and let's have a conversation. Some people get very angry, and we see that sometimes in the chat. It is, to be honest, our audience, I think 99% of people are totally open.
I would agree. You don't see it often.
No, but you see the occasional person who gets mad, particularly because Jason and I sometimes go into, outer kind of regions. And on Talking Weird, I often, have similar type positions, and I'm always very respectful to whoever I have on either of those shows, although Mysterious Library isn't a guest orientated show, but certainly Talking Weird is, and I always want to hear their point of view. But there are people who, if your suggestion or just your interpretation threatens a belief system that they're married to, they can get very upset.
Yeah, I often have those differences even with some of my guests. I'll have, even when I had Ron on, there's much of what Ron talks about I can relate to. I can subscribe to. Some of the things it's not that I think he's wrong. I just don't know if I would cement it in factuality as easily as he does. Okay. It's something to consider in my mind, but it's not something I would speak factually on. Whereas he's put an awful lot, and this is what I respect about him, is this isn't just something he whimmed up over the weekend. I mean, where he stands on his views from the quantum approach to Bigfoot is based on an awful lot of research and experience, and thousands of hours of discussions with other people, and I respect that. Like I say, I don't know if I would look at that as being an option to explain certain things. I found value in some of the things he was explaining. For instance, partial track prints, when you see 2 or 3 steps and then they're gone. How's this happen, right? Well, in a flesh and blood world, there really isn't any option of an explanation for that. And so when I look at some of the things he's talking about, when I look at all the different options, trying to figure out what's the most plausible explanation for a piece of data that I'm staring at, I may discount the 2 of them and say these are the least likely in my mind. I don't throw them away because I may have to go back to them. But out of the 2 or 3 that are left that I'm looking at, saying what's the most plausible, I think this is one where what I've considered to be the most plausible explanation. In many cases, Ron has picked a different one than me, but I have not discounted or thrown away where he's landed as not being possible. It's just not the one that I would start at, if that's a good explanation of that. I can't look at what he's saying and say that's ridiculous. It could easily explain a lot of things that we deal with in this mystery. It just might not be where I'm starting from when it comes to trying to find the answer, But so I see that with different guests a lot of times, but the big thing is I respect their views and the time that they put into coming up with those positions and why they feel that way. I also love when somebody can say, here's what I believe, and let me tell you why. Because there's a lot of people out there that says, this is what I believe, or that's wrong, or this is right. And they don't expand upon any reasoning they put behind to arrive at those points.
Absolutely.
And so even when I differ from where they are, if they can at least offer to me how they got there, I really appreciate that when people do that. But when it comes to the chat, like you said, I'd say, well in advance of 90% of the people that are here are just such an asset to the network. Every now and then somebody, and you know what? We're all human. There's some people that are just having a really bad day, man.
That's
and we
true.
don't get to see that. Okay. We just don't get to see what everybody's going through. And, my experience has been usually when somebody is disruptive in chat or not respectful in a conversation, on the backside of it, they're the first ones to admit, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I was having a bad day or whatever, So, but
I think there's something about the internet too, whether it's in a chat or whether it's posting a comment or responding to somebody's post on a social media site. There's a quasi anonymity which makes some people, in fact, to a degree, it makes almost everybody, but some people go down the trail a lot in a far darker directions. It makes people say things that they wouldn't say in person to somebody. Like, you only have to look at a vaguely contentious post on Twitter or on Facebook and see the type of things people say in response. And you think, I can't believe you would have said that to the person's face. Like, but there's something about behind the keyboard just being able to pound out whatever you want.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was watching Steve Cole's show last night.
Oh, how was that?
He's the Squatch detective. He takes a good approach at kind of addressing some of the hoaxes or but he also looks at some of the things people he thinks in this community that are doing really good at trying to move the ball a little bit. He had somebody on that was explaining a situation or an encounter that he had, and he admitted himself, I wish I would have spent more time looking at this afterwards or addressing this. And there were some people in chat that were very critical that he hadn't done this. And I had made the comment. I says, no matter how prepared you are for any situation or how much mental dissecting on how will I handle a situation that you invest in any scenario, under duress, it's a lot easier to operate behind a keyboard than it is out in the woods. It's that's all there is to it. I mean, I think Mike Tyson is the one who said everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth, right?
That's true.
You say, this is how I'm going to react. And I talk about that a lot. When I was in the military for some time, and I was...
oh, thank you for your service, Jeff.
No, I enjoyed every day of it. So even the crappy days, I still enjoyed. But I look at a squad that I was with that we prepared for everything. I mean, absolutely every scenario we could. And I felt like everybody, all 8 of us, are rock solid. And then you find yourself the first moment that you are in combat or you have an IED go off in your area, there's 1 or 2 people in that squad that break, that just cannot deal with it. And you would have bet every penny you had in the bank that they wouldn't do that. It's just being prepared or preparing for something and then actually experiencing it under duress is 2 different scenarios for people. So I often get a kick out when people say, well, if I ever saw a Bigfoot, this is what I'd do. This is what you need to carry your camera here. So you're always ready to. It's like, dude, you don't understand the parameters that could be in place when you're having that experience, you know. But so did you I know that you had mentioned, did you have some things you wanted to talk about or go over
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I had something which is of personal interest, and we actually Jason and I are going to be talking about this not on the coming Tuesday, but on the following. We would have done it this Tuesday, but we already had that Hacking the Simulation article planned, and that is that Peter Usborne, the man behind Usborne Publishing, passed away this last week at age 85. Now, Peter Usborne's books were seminal for me when I was growing up, or his books in the paranormal. They were in many ways a gateway, I think, for a lot of people in my generation. I actually had this book here. It was called Mysteries of the Unknown: Monsters, Ghosts, and UFOs. I had the hardback copy, which was a collection of their 3 other books, which was The World of the Unknown Ghosts, The World of the Unknown UFOs, The World of the Unknown Monsters. And I guess they were aimed at, I guess kids probably from, I don't know when I got mine, I would have probably been younger than 8, but I'm guessing from about, 7 to probably mid-teens. But they were this fantastic, absolutely fantastic gateway just to introduce you to things that, were in this field. Like I still remember, in fact, I have a copy of the UFOs book here I bought somewhat recently. I don't have my original hardcover of all of them, but it has things like the Hopkinsville goblins in there and illustrations of the Hopkinsville goblins. And the ghosts one had famous haunted places like Borley Rectory, and the monsters one obviously had everything from Bigfoot to the Loch Ness monster to mythical beings. And as a child, they're just loaded with these fascinating, enthralling, and sometimes terrifying illustrations. They also did another series of books, this series here, which was Guides to the Supernatural World, and they had one on vampires. And this is the book which collected them all. They had one on vampires, I think one on ghosts, and one on mysterious powers. And the illustrations in there were super like creepy when you were a little kid.
Well, yeah.
But
I
I mean,
can
it was so enthralling, you couldn't look away from it. So Peter Usborne passed. So we thought we would do a show where we talked about these books, particularly, as I said, that series and the collection, which was Mysteries of the Unknown, because that's what I had when I was little. I had some of the supernatural guides a little bit later, like probably actually more when I was 12, 13 or something. But I had that wonderful book with the fire-breathing dragon and the ghost in the background and the UFOs. I had that from a very young age. And that, and In Search of, the Leonard Nimoy vehicle, which in Australia was actually called, I think, Mysteries of the World or Mysteries of the Universe or something. They rebranded it in Australia, and they had an Australian presenter. I think it had something to do with how much Australian content they required on TV or something. They had an Australian presenter intro before it went to Leonard Nimoy, and then an Australian presenter would do the outro. But In Search of, and that book there I just showed, those were the things that were my initial gateway or point of entry into this entire world. So without that book, there's a very good chance that I wouldn't be doing Talking Weird and Mysterious Library now.
That's interesting. It really makes you wonder how many young people did carve out such a passion and an interest in some of these things based on those books and being exposed to them when they were young.
Did you have something like that was your kind of entry point?
Yeah,
Jeff, or?
I can remember being interested in, for me, a lot of it was the movies. I can remember seeing Close Encounters when I was, very young. And, and I also remember seeing the PG film when I was, probably 8 years old or something like that, going to a Saturday matinee at a movie theater. And it was played as one of the, the intros before the movie started, Now that all they play is turn off your cell phone, go buy some snacks. But back then they had little mini trailers, before the movie would start. And I remember that being one of them. I remember seeing it, just thinking, this is fascinating to me, but never really at that age, never told mom, hey, can we go to the library and get books about this? Back then, there really wasn't a lot of stuff about that. But I find it really interesting that the one thing that got me intrigued, at least into the Bigfoot phenomena, was watching that trailer at 8 years old. Later on, going on to without really having any other than that trailer for 30 seconds, never really having an understanding of anything about what Bigfoot was. I never grew up in a family where I had an uncle telling stories around the campfire, or anything like that. But had an encounter at 18 years old, and really that whole not understanding what this was and why was it there where it was, and all of this. I really wrestled with that for a long time. And when I started researching and going backwards into trying to understand what happened to me at such a long time ago, at 18 years old, it was amazing that I'm starting out at that trailer I saw at 8 years old, because those men left that football on the 5-yard line and it hasn't been moved since. That the one thing we look at as being kind of the resolute cornerstone is that one thing that got me intrigued when I was 8 years old. It's like incredible that we're still looking at that as kind of the pinnacle of evidence, but
Yeah, it's funny how imagery can affect you. I think it can affect you at any age, but I think when you're at those impressionable younger years, seeing something like that can just get burnt into your subconscious and it never goes.
yeah, especially for young boys, I think, I do a lot of work with and have a lot of discussions with a friend of mine who is a psychologist and works in the human behavior and dealing with PTSD and traumatic events and body language and all these things, right? And one of the interesting things that we had recently talked about was when, as young children, the difference between boys and girls and the things that girls learn to understand. For instance, what does it take to make a relationship work? When a girl is in high school, she spent her life so far as a young girl playing with the dolls and the imagery of a wedding day and what that's supposed to look like. Us boys, we've been slamming Hot Wheels into the corner of the wall and playing with dinosaurs, right? So I mean, it really is interesting how for young boys, what they end up in their lifetime looking at as passions and interests and things like that, really does stem from that young age. What captured your imagination at that young age?
I think you're absolutely right. And I do think that women have better understanding of relationships because of all those things you mentioned. I suspect too that there are more conversations with their peer groups about relationships as well. Like boys don't
There
really
are.
talk about that kind of thing. They might say, "Oh, that girl's pretty, haha, you like her," or something. But there's no real conversation about those type of things in circles of boys or really circles of men either. But I know that traditionally, yeah, girls and females and women traditionally do talk more, I think, about relationships than men do. So
Yeah. I had wrote a paper in college in a psychology class on really what I interpreted as the understanding of what takes a relation makes to what it takes to make a relationship work for men, for young men, until they have hurt somebody in the, broken a heart, and until they've felt that from the other direction and had theirs broken, we really by default don't have an idea of what that's supposed to look like. Once we've experienced what it's like to hurt somebody and be hurt, I think at that point, at that moment, you start understanding what's it going to take to make this work. I think for young women that there is a default setting of that simple understanding without having to experience both of those. But that's just basically because they spent their young formative years of, 6 to 12 years old envisioning what that's supposed to look like. And us young boys spent not 1 minute imagining what that's supposed to look like.
Mhm.
So
I think too, as far as dating and things for men, now I'm going to sound like I'm giving pickup artist advice or something, but I'm not trying to. I think Hollywood has traditionally shown the way that relationships work and the way dating work in a way that it doesn't actually work. I think the way they
Yeah.
present how somebody wins the girl isn't the way that people actually have success winning the girl. So I think a lot of men, without having had that base of friends and perhaps mothers and aunts and other women who've talked to them about relationships, because again, these aren't discussions you normally have that often as a man. I think most men look towards Hollywood and go, well, this is how I go to win the girl. And the reality is the ways Hollywood shows you to win the girl are never going to be how it actually works in real life. So that's all that most men have to go on. And it's horrible advice. So it's a shame that there isn't that better support network of explaining how relationships work for men. There really isn't.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think by the time some men get an opportunity to figure it out, some of them have gotten so ingrained into the negative reactions to not understanding it that they have developed a narcissistic view, or they have these negative ketones that just simply aren't, you're not going to have an easy time changing them at that point. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I often will think about, everybody had this friend, if they weren't this person themselves, is I had one friend that was a nice looking kid, um, but he was hilarious. I mean, his sense of humor was amazing, right? I mean, he could make anybody laugh. And in high school, he wasn't the football star. He wasn't, I guess if you would ask most girls that we knew, what do you like about him? They'll all say, oh, he's so funny. Basically, that means at that age, they aren't going to go out with him. I mean, he's not, they didn't describe him as cool or handsome or, popular. He's just funny, right? And yet now when he hits 30 years old, and a lot of these girls have been with the wrong guy for them, and you ask them, what are you looking for in a guy? They're looking for him. They're looking for him at that point. That is the guy they need right there. Grounded, responsible, funny, not the bad boy image, not the star athlete, because those things are just momentarily. I can tell you right now, my high school quarterback in high school, right now he's a police officer that weighs about 280 pounds, and he's not going to chase any bad guys and catch them. I mean, it's just, people change from the things that we see value in when we're young to the things we go searching for now. It's a lot different. But
yeah, that's true.
But
very true.
But yeah, no, I think that's awesome that you guys are going to be talking about it. It's kind of neat that you're kind of doing that in honor of him with this show. So, and Jason will bring some great stuff to that conversation too.
He always does. He's so great.
Yeah,
I love doing the show with Jason.
I will. I've often said, if I had Jason's historical knowledge, and I had your accent, that my IQ would automatically go up like 100 points. I mean, it's just crazy how, especially for when I think about Jason's, his views on not one religion, but his familiarity with all religions and the origins and the aspect of thought and the historical references. I mean, it's like his brain must be on the verge of sparks coming out of his ears at all times. I cannot believe how versed he is in those conversations.
But, he's fantastic. He's such an asset to the show and to the network. It's so great we have him.
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, even when he does some stuff over on Texas Front Porch and different areas too, and doesn't seem to be doesn't matter what the topic is. It feels like he just spent a month researching it right before he went on the air, just because he has that stockpile of reference that's just there. I remember when I had him on Coffee Time and I started asking him, how did you compile something like this? He says, I read a lot of books when I was young, just book after book after book. But
yeah, that's why he's perfect for Mysterious Library, because he's really well read. So that's important when you do, I guess, a show where, mind you, lately we've done an awful lot of documentaries. We were both very busy, and I had Midwest Weird Fest, so we had a lot of paranormal documentaries coming through. But we're back to written material this week and next week, so that's nice.
Tell me a little bit about how did that go out at the Midwest Weird Fest? For those who are maybe listening on podcast or aren't familiar with the event, why don't you tell us a little bit about it, what goes into it, and what you found to be the highlight this year?
Sure. It's a festival. That was our 7th year. We're now into our 8th year. Submissions are open now, actually, for any filmmakers at midwestweirdfest.com. We run first weekend of every March, and essentially the festival, it's a film festival, and it's a celebration of all things frightening, fantastic, paranormal, and just plain weird. This year was our biggest year yet. We had an awful lot of filmmakers in attendance. We must have had something like 40 filmmakers there, which is a lot for a mid-tier festival. We're a festival that, without, I guess, sound like I'm blowing my own horn, but we consistently rank in Film Freeway's top 100 best reviewed film festivals. And Film Freeway is the major industry platform where filmmakers submit to film festivals. So there's 13,000 film festivals on that platform, and we're always in the top 100 as rated by filmmakers. So it's a great festival to come to, whether you're a filmmaker or whether you're just interested in these things. The downtown area of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is where we are, it's a beautiful little city. It's a gorgeous cinema, the Micon Cinema. It's an old cinema which has been plex, so it's a twin plex now. There's what would have been a balcony, and now the downstairs are two different cinemas, and we run for 3 days. We have films on both screens, and this year, as far as our highlights, well, I'll tell you the film that won the Palme d'Or, which we introduced this year. The Cannes Film Festival has an award called the Palme d'Or, which basically translates into the Golden Palm. It's the premier award of the Cannes Film Festival, and perhaps one of the premier awards in the entire planet for film. I wanted to honor and memorialize somebody known whose name was Raymond Palmer, who was a Wisconsin resident. He died in 1977, which is a while ago now, but he was the editor of Amazing Stories, which was a country's biggest science fiction magazine of the day. He introduced a number of stories written by somebody called Richard Shaver, which now we know of as the Shaver Mystery. And Richard Shaver supposedly had contacts with an advanced race that lived underneath the surface of the earth. These were in the years prior to flying saucers, just before. So when flying saucers appeared in the skies in 1947, both Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver were able to say that's proof of what we were writing about. And then Ray Palmer became one of the biggest popularizers of UFO belief early on. He hired Kenneth Arnold, the first flying saucer witness, indeed the person whose report coined the phrase flying saucers, to go and investigate early UFO crash in Maury Island. And then they wrote a book together, Ray Palmer and Kenneth Arnold, called The Coming of the Saucers. And Ray Palmer continued to publish magazines in that space. So he founded Fate magazine, which is still running today. He published a magazine called Mystic, and then called Search. He published a magazine just called Flying Saucers. Anyway, in many ways, Palmer's been forgotten. He's been written out of the history almost intentionally, I think, for a number of reasons, which I won't go into now, but he was very important. So I thought we'll introduce the Palme d'Or award this year based on Ray Palmer's name to memorialize Ray Palmer, and also to acknowledge excellence in the field today, whether it was in the science fiction field, which Palmer was in, or in the supernatural or UFO realm, which he was also in. And Melissa Tittle, who most of our audience might know from shows like UFO Witness, where she's one of the two hosts, or she was one of the producers of Ancient Aliens for about 9 seasons. seasons. She's been on a number of shows like that. She came, we world premiered her film Code 12, which is, funnily enough, it's about the simulation, really, which Jason and I will be talking about tomorrow night on Mysterious Library. Not that show, but about the simulation in general. And she won the inaugural Palme d'Or for that film. So that was a big deal. We also had a wonderful we world premiered that. We also world premiered 2 other documentaries in this space. We world premiered Accidental Truth, which is the new documentary for MUFON, directed by Ron James, which essentially is an up-to-date overview of what's going on in the world of UFO research today. A fantastic documentary, not released yet. Again, we did the world premiere at the beginning of last month. And we did another world premiere of a film called Bigfoot and Marty, it's a Bigfoot documentary in a way. I mean, it has people like Ken Gerhard in it and other researchers, but it's primarily about the poet laureate of the UP, the Upper Peninsula, a man named Martin Akatz, who has a fascination with Bigfoot and writes Bigfoot poetry. So those documentaries were all fantastic. We screened, I think, 16 or 17 feature films and something like 70 short films. So it's a jam-packed weekend. But people should think about, if they make films, they should think about submitting, whether it's sci-fi or horror or paranormal documentaries or strange music videos, or even if they've written a screenplay. We have a screenplay competition. But more to the point, it's worth coming to. It's such a fun festival. It's an absolute blast.
What's the duration of the festival? Is it a couple days? Or?
3 days. Yeah, we open on the Friday and we run through till the Sunday night. So, and it's very reasonably priced. Like we've always tried to, with the Micon Cinema, who are just fantastic. We've always tried to have the pricing really accessible. So I think we'll probably stay the same price next year, but so far it's been $55 for a full season pass. That gets you into everything.
Yeah, that's pretty decent. I mean,
or you can come to just one film for like $6 or something. So it's very accessible, you know.
Well, if you were to interact with the whole 3 days, I mean, you're talking about less than $1 an hour. Probably,
yeah.
probably,
Absolutely.
To be honest with you.
Absolutely. And we're a very social festival. I think this is one of the reasons filmmakers love it and rate it so high as well, is that there are some festivals you go to, because I've been to a lot of film festivals, and some are great and some aren't so great, but there's a real community there. Like our audience are really on board for the programming. They really love this type of content, and the audience hang out with the filmmakers hang out with each other, hang out with the audience. We're not there isn't this kind of tier division. Like, okay, the guests are, know, it's like, okay, we're all going to the bar next door. Or
there's no VIP access to be gained there. It's all in the same room.
Yeah, and everybody seems to love it. They love the fact that it's just, it's a wonderful vibe. I've ran a number of film festivals over the last 20 years, and this is my favorite by far. I love Midwest Weird Fest.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be putting that on my calendar for next year. I think
you should come, Jeff. Get Doug to come as well. He's only about an hour and a half away. He's in.
We're pretty close. You're just over the border in Wisconsin, so
yeah, come to it. You'll have a great time. So it's a heck of a fun weekend.
I used to play in a band, and we'd play in Minneapolis a lot, but we'd go and we'd play in Wisconsin a lot. The Pabst Theater and stuff in the Milwaukee area I loved that area. I mean, it's changed a lot.
What kind of music did you play?
It was all our bands. We opened up for the Replacements in Minneapolis at 7th Street Entry a lot. So at that time, it was kind of probably a current descriptive would probably be like indie rock, but back then it was like The Cure and the Replacements and that kind of stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It certainly wasn't something that we had any hopes or ambitions to make a career out of. We actually wanted to buy homes and have families. So I mean, it kind of a realistic approach. I spent some time in the military, went to college, and then at some point started playing in a band again and doing some light touring. But like I say, I mean, it was more for the experience than for the money or for the idea of being famous or something like that. But it was fun with all the different people that you'd meet doing it. A lot of, established bands. One of the last times that we played, I remember being at a deal in Illinois and sitting backstage talking to some people, and this group comes in, and I thought, God, that guy looks familiar. And after a little bit, they introduce themselves as Kings of Leon, and I'm like,
Wow.
oh, but yeah, it's a lot of stories from people you've met more than accomplishments, but it was a fun period in my life.
Oh, I bet. What a blast. I was never in a band. I wish I was.
Yeah.
Wish I had
There's
that
a
memory.
Milwaukee area band that we played with a lot called the Guffs. And they were kind of big for their area, one of the biggest local bands in the area. But it was so cool to play at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee just because of the heritage that's there. I mean, to
Yeah.
stand on that stage, and it's like for a country boy to play at the Grand Ole Opry. That's kind of what it was like for me to be at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee. But and there was a lot of history and culture too, where we played often at a bar called 7th Street Entry in Minneapolis that was on the corner with First Avenue. I mean, you had First Avenue and 7th Street Entry kind of all in one area there. And just the history of people that have played there over the years was kind of neat to stand in one of those buildings and say, wow, we're going to play here tonight. This is where all these people have played,
What a thrill.
But yeah. Well, I tell you, we could probably look at landing this plane. We've been going at it for almost an hour and a half. And again, we apologize for not being live on YouTube. I believe the show will be posted live on or be posted on YouTube and put into our YouTube library either on Friday or Saturday. So we've been live here on Facebook. We'll be live on Twitter, and my show tonight and your and Jason's show tomorrow night will kind of be under that same pretense, where if people want to be a part of the interaction and the conversation, you can go to Untold Radio's Facebook page and find the link to the event to where you can, just like you do here on YouTube, be on Facebook, watching it live there and interacting. And then on Friday or Saturday, all of the shows that we've done this week will all be posted to our YouTube library. So, but yeah, just a little thing we've been wrestling with this week. It's a reality for some of our channels that discuss a lot of different things to ruffle the feathers now and then of somebody who says, hey, you guys need to be in timeout. I don't know that it was a fair application, but we're dealing with it the best we can. So I look forward to your guys' show tomorrow night.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's lovely to always see you pop up in the chat as well there. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. I come in with a wrench as a moderator, but I have yet to find anything to really need to moderate, to be honest.
Well, thank you.
I just enjoy being part of the discussion. It's pretty fun. So,
well, thank you for having me. It was great. I had a lot of fun chatting to you on Coffee Time.
Yeah, the only one I have left on my hit list to get on Coffee Time, and we had Brad on, his co-host, but I haven't had Dr. Jones on, and that's just simply because, he's still practicing and does have a business that he runs, and it's just kind of inconvenient on mid-morning on a Monday to try to get him on. But at some point, I'm going to start circling back, and we'll have to go back and get everybody on for a second time. Now, that was kind of the plan, was we'll just kind of through rotation get our hosts to kind of circulate through and join us on the show and talk maybe about what they've been up to, what they've got coming up on their future shows. But it's kind of evolved into what's the latest in paranormal news and what's the latest in science news. I think those are interesting things to see and talk about too. So hopefully people are enjoying the Coffee Time show here. So
no, it's a great show. I like it.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your Monday, Dean, and thanks so much for joining us.
You too, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And that will put another Coffee Time in the books. Again, appreciate you guys joining us on Facebook and Twitter. Show will go up on Friday, I believe Friday or Saturday on YouTube. Be up later today or tonight on all the podcast platforms. So for all the listeners that enjoy listening to the show, you'll find that there. Otherwise, I hope all of you have a great rest of your day today here on Monday, and we will see you next week.